The United States doesn't see a regime change as the necessary condition for achieving its strategic objectives. What President Trump wants is a non-nuclear Iran, which in his terms goes beyond just a promise not to develop nuclear weapons. It would include commitments that would go beyond the 2015 nuclear deal, JCPOA.
Nearly 3 months after the start of the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran, the region remains on edge. Diplomatic channels remain open, yet tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, renewed escalation in Lebanon, and growing uncertainty across the Gulf continue to raise doubts about how stable the situation really is. In this episode, I speak with Dr. Hamidreza Azizi, visiting fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs in Berlin. A conversation about Iran, regional diplomacy, and the future of the Middle East. Welcome to Fokus Nahost. My name is Josephine Herrmann. Nearly 3 months after the start of the war between the United States, Israel, and Iran, the region remains on edge. A fragile ceasefire is in place, diplomatic channels remain open, yet military incidents, tensions around the Strait of Hormuz, and renewed escalation involving Iran-backed actors continue to raise doubts about how stable the situation really is. At the same time, some of the central questions remain unanswered. Has the war changed the strategic balance in the Middle East? What happened to Iran's nuclear program? How stable is the Iranian leadership? And what role are regional actors such as Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE playing behind the scenes? My guest today is Dr. Hamidreza Azizi. He's a visiting fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs in Berlin. He also serves as an associate researcher at Klingendael, the Netherlands Institute of International Relations. Originally from Iran, he holds a PhD in regional studies from the University of Tehran and has taught at several Iranian universities. His research focuses on Iran's foreign and security policy, regional geopolitics, and Iran's relations with Russia and its neighbors. A conversation about the fragile ceasefire, regional diplomacy, and the question of what comes next. And Dr. Hamidreza Azizi, for listeners who may have lost track of events over the past weeks, where exactly do we stand today, and how different is the situation from where we were at the beginning of this conflict?
Well, what we have had in the past few weeks has been a very fragile ceasefire. Some would say that it is only a ceasefire in name, because especially in the past few days, there have been a lot of cases where the two sides went almost to the verge of the resumption of conflict. And this has happened particularly on two fronts. One, in and around the Strait of Hormuz, the exchanges of fire between Iran and the United States over a variety of issues. So the Iranian narrative here is that the United States is apparently trying to open a southern route close to the shores of Oman for the ships to pass. And this would be actually a confirmation of a Wall Street Journal report that's published week ago or so, saying that the United States was basically trying to restart the so-called Project Freedom to help vessels go through the straits. CENTCOM denied that, but then New York Times reported 2 days ago that the United States, the CENTCOM forces actually have been quietly helping ships to go through, and in the past months or so, 70 ships managed to pass. So Iran sees obviously this as a sort of a U.S. attempt to erode its leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, and has started to respond. And there has been exchanges of fire, but both sides have shown that they still don't want a return to the full-scale war. This is one front. The other front has been Lebanon, where Israel has been expanding the scope of its operation. from areas south of Litani, meaning the southern Lebanon, towards areas in the north, and now they are operating basically over Zahrani River, which is the northern river in Lebanon. And there have been threats of attacks on Lebanon's Lahia district as well, which is the main headquarters of Hezbollah, and that resulted in the Iranian threats that they would respond. So this is the current situation, and that's why I call it fragile. In the meantime, two sides have been exchanging messages and texts actually on a potential memorandum of understanding last week. Toward the weekend, it appeared as if the two sides are almost done with the text, but then on Friday, President Trump apparently didn't endorse the final text, wanted some revisions, and so it's getting back and forth. And the longer it takes, even those two active fronts that I just described, the more the risk for the resumption of conflict, either as a result of a miscalculation or as a result of some sort of spoiler role by third parties or domestic hardliners on the side of Iran or the United States.
Mm. So, as you just said, Trump insists that negotiations are moving forward, yet we continue to see strikes and missile attacks as well. At the same time, Iranian military representatives say the United States demand our total surrender, and the Iranian nation will never surrender. Without surrender, war is inevitable. How should we understand these signals, and how stable is the current situation at the current ceasefire, really?
Well, the main challenge here is mistrust, a very deep mistrust on both sides. And in this case, especially a kind of a traumatized mistrust on the side of Iran. And the reason, which is quite obvious in their official narrative as well, is that they were in the middle of negotiations where when they were attacked twice, once last June 2025, and now in just February. So they see, I mean, there is this kind of view now among the Iranian strategists. It is expressed, quite often here and there that the current diplomatic track can also be a deception tactic by Trump and the United States in order to kind of make Iran busy, let's say, with diplomacy while preparing for a more decisive strike. And at the same time, actually, even without a return to a full-scale war, was changing the boundaries of what is acceptable below the threshold of war, like what I just mentioned in the Strait of Hormuz, and in that sense, gradually eroding Iran's leverage. So this is what they see. And then this kind of back and forth diplomatic track, which again has to do with the lack of trust, Iran not agreeing to meet directly after the Islamabad talks, the first round with the US representative out of security concerns, also out of political considerations. So this is the current state of affairs. What I can say following kind of both sides actually is that both Washington and Tehran do want to deal for different reasons, but the challenge, as I said, is mistrust, and then the outcome it creates this mistrust and this kind of endless process of back and forth in direct negotiations. The outcome is that it leads to this state of suspension and unpredictability and the fragility of the ceasefire. So this is how I can describe it at the moment.
After a month of conflict, what has actually changed then? Did any side achieve its strategic objectives?
Well, it depends how we define strategic objectives on different sides. And we shouldn't forget that this conflict This conflict has three sides and not two. So the long-term strategic objectives of the United States and Israel do not necessarily overlap on all cases. Like one of the things that I can understand from again both offshore positions and also the kind of studying the behavior of the United States during this war, before that, and now during the ceasefire, is that the United States doesn't see a regime change as the necessary condition for achieving its strategic objectives. What President Trump wants is non-nuclear Iran, which in his terms goes beyond just a promise not to develop nuclear weapons. It would include commitments that would go beyond the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, or what Trump calls as Obama deal. And at the same time, some sort of how to say, I mean, especially in these circumstances, some guarantees that freedom of navigation, especially at the Strait of Hormuz, is going to be provided. But for Israel, given this long-standing shadow war, which then came to open gradually after October 2023 with Iran, they see the existence of the Islamic Republic, and I would say to some extent a strong state in Iran, regardless of its nature, as a potential threat. I mean, the only question would be whether it is a short-term or a longer-term threat, because. And so, in this sense, I think these strategic objectives do not necessarily overlap. And at the moment, I don't see the United States having achieved any of those objectives. So, a naval blockade against Iran is there. There's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, Iran is also keeping its leverage over the strait, which means that it is impacting the global economy. Maybe at this moment, we can say that at least in the short term, Israel is benefiting from this situation because it means a weakening of Iran's long-term strategic potential, not militarily speaking, but in terms of, I mean, in the sense of the Islamic Republic having to concentrate more on its domestic affairs when this war ends, in order to revive its economy, in order to restructure everything, basically, from the armed forces to its political structure, etc. So, from the Israeli point of view, it doesn't mean that the Iranian threat has been removed. So it's still not. It doesn't still amount to a strategic victory, but at least for the short term, I think they are better positioned in terms of their objectives than is the United States somehow.
You already mentioned the nuclear program. Where does Iran's nuclear program stand today?
From a technical point of view, it's not functioning at the moment because after the US and Israeli attacks on Iran's main nuclear facilities in Natanz and Fordo, the enrichment, at least what we know officially and openly, the enrichment has stopped. And at the same time, the capabilities in terms of a potential for resumption of those activities is there. Technical know-how is there. We know, and this is confirmed also by the IAEA, that Iran still has a stockpile of these centrifuges that it can use for further enrichment of its uranium whenever they want. IAEA doesn't have a clear view of where they are because of Iran limiting its cooperation with the IAEA after the 12-day war. And on top of all that, there is a stockpile of around 400 kilogram of highly enriched uranium, 60%, which means that it is close to the weapons grade. And this is at the heart of the U.S. and Israeli demands, of course, that Iran should hand them over to ship them out of the country. Iran is saying that what they can do is to dilute it to lower levels so that they can use it in their reactors inside the country. So this is the current state of affairs. Well, Iran insists on its nuclear rights to be recognized, and I think at the moment they are also offering some a few years of suspension of the enrichment, but there's still no sign that they would agree to abandon enrichment or the nuclear program altogether.
Hmm. At various points, there were speculations about regime collapse or even regime change. How stable is the Iranian leadership today?
It's difficult to say because the system showed a great deal of resilience in terms of keeping its structure functioning despite the decapitations. And despite the compound domestic and external crises that it experienced in a very short amount of time, from the mass protests in January, which resulted in the massacre of the protesters by the Islamic Republic security forces to this war, they managed to adapt and also, perform in an acceptable way from a technical standpoint in this latest war. So one can say that what has to do with the structures of power and also the leadership overall, it is stable. But we shouldn't forget that we are still at the middle of the war. I mean, again, this is a ceasefire in name. And being at the middle of war means different things. On the one hand, it means that the um, even increased securitization of the internal situation, which means further crackdowns, like restrictions on the internet that now are kind of being a little bit loosened, but not to the extent that they were before. And most importantly, the executions that are happening almost every day. So these measures can be justified. I mean, are justified. Can be is not the word. This is what the Islamic Republic tries to justify as wartime measures, but this cannot continue forever. And on the other hand, economy is not doing good. The latest statistics from the Iranian Central Bank, which was published just yesterday, shows that inflation now stands at around 80%, which is unprecedented in the past few decades. So they know that this is not sustainable, and that's why actually they want to deal. So the bigger risk, I think, at this moment for the leadership, of course, is probably not an abrupt regime change, but rather the erosion of its capacity and some sort of a state collapse in the longer term. This is the scenario that they want to prevent, using different measures at the moment.
Mhm. One aspect often overlooked in Europe is the position of the Gulf states. You recently wrote that Qatar's role in the current diplomatic process has been much larger than its public profile suggests, and that Doha was centrally involved in drafting the Memorandum of Understanding and mediating between Tehran and Washington. How important have Gulf states been in preventing further escalation, and how do countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait view the current situation?
Well, first of all, what this war showed is that there's no unity among the Gulf states when it comes to strategic matters. And the rift that was always somehow evident in the positions of these countries and the rivalry that existed between them, especially between Saudi Arabia and UAE, somehow manifested itself even more strongly in this war because on the one hand we've had UAE, which according to the available reports has been kind of advocating for further strikes on Iran, the weakening of Iran, and has been basically standing on the side, or closer, better to say, of Israel. And then we have had Saudi Arabia together with Qatar trying to somehow manage this situation, reaching out to Iran itself. And when it comes to the Saudi Arabia, for example, as the biggest power among the Gulf countries, it's been kind of successful because just look at the different way that Iran has been approaching UAE and Saudi Arabia. So both of them have pipelines that bypass the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has done its best, let's say, to make it more and more difficult for the UAE to use that port by extending the area under control of Iran, as they claim it, to the south of Port of Fujairah, which is the key hub for transiting the UAE oil. But there has been nothing against Saudi Arabia. They could have asked the Houthis, for example, to also do some activities against the shipping and oil shipments in the Red Sea. They didn't. And we have Oman, which has been officially neutral, but at the same time practically closer to Iran. And more recent evidence suggests that they have been also considering Iranian idea of joint management of the Strait of Hormuz. So this is the fragmentation that we see among the Gulf states. And here, I mean, this has been a kind of diplomatic profile that Qatar has been building over the past few years, trying to use diplomacy as some sort of a deterrence for itself, and also in terms of elevating its regional role. So after being hit by Iran itself and being aware of the limitations of its own power, they started reaching out to different parties to become part of the solution instead of being a part of the problem or being seen as part of the problem by any side. So this is the way I can describe it, and then it complements this quartet that was formed between Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. All of them also trying to solve this problem.
You already mentioned Lebanon earlier. One of the most striking developments in recent days is that Tehran now seems to be linking the negotiations to the conflict in Lebanon. How significant is that?
Lebanon itself is quite significant, of course, Hezbollah. So I remember that after the 12-day war, there were two different views of the utility of Iranian ties to non-state actors. In this case, especially Hezbollah, because we remember that during the 12-day war, none of these groups, did anything in support of Iran. I have my own interpretation, which was proved to be the case actually, and that's the fact that last June, Iran didn't feel an existential threat, and there was no need to expand the battlefield. They want to limit the battlefield, not to expand it. This time, there was an existential threat. And it was shared somehow by Hezbollah as well, because we know that there was a ceasefire reached in November 2024, and over more than a year, almost 15 months, there was no rockets or drones or anything fired from the side of Hezbollah, but targeted killings of Hezbollah commanders by Israel continued. So this situation was seen as unsustainable on the side of Hezbollah as well. So they saw a momentum, they joined the fight. And now when we look at and listen to the narrative among Iranian security experts and strategists, they claim that Hezbollah played actually a significant role in Iran's war strategy, in the sense that they allowed Iran to concentrate more on the US positions in the region, and also the Gulf states, while Hezbollah using its shorter range missiles and drones and rockets, taking care of absorbing part of at least Israeli military capacity. So the argument is that the utility of Hezbollah has been proven to be already the case in this war. And also there's a political dimension to this. So Iranian leadership sees itself, regardless of the fragilities that you and I as observers describe and just discussed, the Iranian leadership sees itself as somehow, even if not a victor, but at least somehow more powerful, coming out of this war more powerful, especially uh, because of the control that they have managed to keep over the Strait of Hormuz, which means the expansion of the regional rule. So this is not, is inherently incompatible with being inactive on the Lebanon front. So are you a regional power or not? So that's why they want to keep this connection. So there's a deterrence logic, a military logic, and there's a political logic in terms of Iran seeing itself as a regional power, needing allies in the region, Hezbollah being the main ally for Iran in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm. I have one final question. What would you say? What are the most likely scenarios over the next 3 or even 6 months?
That's a long, long time, in the context of the Middle East, because even 3 hours is now considered to be quite some time, given all the unpredictability and the variety of factors that exist. So we have to speak in terms of scenarios, not just one scenario. It depends, of course, primarily.
Yeah. So which one is the most likely scenario?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I really at the moment cannot say which one is most likely because look, we should appreciate the fact that the president of the most powerful country on earth and in history is so unpredictable that even his close aides do not know what he's going to do. He's so unpredictable that he orders something, for example, the Project Freedom, and then CENTCOM as the operational arm of the U.S. military in the Middle East has to reinterpret it in order to, make it applicable, and then in the end, it doesn't work. It primarily depends on whether there's going to be an agreement between Iran and the United States. So we can speak of a more optimistic and more pessimistic scenario. And the more optimistic scenario would be if the memorandum of understanding currently being negotiated and reportedly to some extent agreed between the sides would be finalized. So that would give some space. President Trump can claim some sort of success and leave probably the region. Iran can also claim its own victory, start concentrating on domestic affairs. The Strait of Hormuz would be reopened, maybe not as it was before February, in the sense of total freedom of movement, but in terms of a nominal, maybe again we are speaking of optimistic scenario, nominal Iranian control only. So this would be the optimistic scenario. But even in that, I don't expect the enmity between Iran and Israel to go away. If at all, it's going to be even further strengthened by the experience of this war on both sides. So both sides are now seeing the other as a bigger threat than it was before. One side has a trauma of war, the other side sees the Iran kind of getting somehow more powerful in some aspects. So at some point, I think, with or without the United States, I would bet on without the United States. If they finish this, I don't really expect any further US president to want to do this again. But even without that, I think at some point it will play up again between Iran and Israel. So this is the optimistic scenario we're speaking about. And then the pessimistic scenario, of course, would be the collapse of the ceasefire, the return to the war. Maybe in this case, President Trump deciding to target Iranian infrastructure, Iran responding by targeting the infrastructure of the region. And that would be honestly a doomsday scenario because, look, one of the reasons, for example, that the oil prices stay at some sort of a manageable level is that there is some strategic reserves to be freed up to the markets, but already half of it worldwide has been used. So in a month or two, it's going to skyrocket, even especially if tensions continue. So these are the two scenarios that we can speak of at the moment. None of them would mean a very peaceful Middle East, but one would defer the challenge to an unknown time in the future somehow.
Dr. Azizi, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
This was a new episode of Focus Nahost with Dr. Hamidreza Azizi, visiting fellow at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs in Berlin. If you found this conversation valuable, feel free to share it, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review. It helps ensure that more people can hear these perspectives. You can also read the full transcript of this interview in my Substack newsletter. And if you're interested in the broader regional context, I recently spoke with Iraq's Deputy Foreign Minister, Dr. Hisham al-Alawi, about the regional fallout of the war, Iraq's position between Tehran and Washington, and the risk of a wider escalation in the Middle East. Dr. Azizi has also recently published a new book on Iran, The Axis of Resistance, Iran, Israel, and the Struggle for the Middle East. I'll link it in the show notes. My name is Josephine Herrmann. Thank you for listening, and I speak to you soon.